I found out I was divorced while I was in the desert. Through a PDF attachment. My 13-year marriage ended with an email notification for months into my deployment in Kandahar. Sender, Becky. Subject line, let's handle this like adults. The message was 3 sentences long. No more, no less. The paperwork had already been filed. Our joint account had already been emptied. Her new boyfriend, Jeremy, had already moved into our house in Spokane. I read the email twice, closed my laptop, took a shower in the shared stall, put on my uniform, and went on shift. I didn't tell anyone. That night, back at my bunk, I replied with a single word. Understood. No arguing. No begging. No threats. That was it. My bunkmate, Wilson, noticed something was off. Without looking up from his book, he asked, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just some things back home." He nodded. That was the end of it. Soldiers know when to let things lie. The truth is, I wasn't surprised. Things had started changing about 6 months before the deployment. Small shifts, but consistent ones. Becky stopped asking about my day. She began staying late at the dental clinic and always answered calls from there. She went to the gym 3 times a week, but never seemed tired. New clothes. New friends I didn't recognize. New passwords on her phone. I didn't confront her. I didn't check her messages or follow her around. That's not who I am. But I'm not blind either. So I prepared quietly. I rented a storage unit across town and moved the important things there. My birth certificate, our marriage license, the house deed in my name alone, thanks to the VA loan, my military documents. I added my grandfather's watch and my mother's old silverware. Some things aren't just valuable, they're rooted. I also opened a separate account at a different bank. I started routing a portion of my paycheck there. Not enough for her to notice, but enough that I wouldn't be starting from zero if things went south. The night before I left, she hugged me at the airport. "Take care of yourself," she said. Her eyes were dry. It felt less like saying goodbye to a husband heading to war and more like seeing off a coworker on a temporary assignment. I should have understood then, but part of me still hoped I was wrong. I wasn't. What she didn't know was that I had prepared for this moment. I didn't start the fight, but I ended it. I met Becky in 2010 at a friend's backyard barbecue. I was home between deployments, staying with my buddy Jason in Spokane. She had just finished nursing school but chose a dental office job because it was less stressful. 8 months later, we were married. She used to say she was proud of my service, but she never truly understood it. Her father was a bank manager. Her brother was a pharmacist. No one in her family had ever served. She'd ask when I planned to get a real job. 15 years later, she still hadn't accepted that the Army wasn't something I was passing time with. It was my career. We bought our house in 2014. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a quiet neighborhood. The mortgage was in my name because the VA loan required it, but I added her to the deed anyway. That's what married people do. Or so I thought. My father died a year into our marriage, collapsing while shoveling snow. My mother passed 3 years later from lung cancer. She'd never smoked a day in her life. They left me some money. Not a fortune, but enough to pay off Becky's and my student loans and still have a little left over. Life has a way of preparing you slowly, then delivering the final blow in silence. Over the course of our marriage, I was deployed 4 times, twice to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan. Every time I came home, Becky felt a little more distant, a little more restless, like she was playing a role she no longer believed in. The words were still there, but the meaning behind them was gone. Once, when I mentioned I was considering staying in for another 4 years, she didn't even hesitate. "I didn't sign up to be a military wife," she said. "I'm tired of being alone all the time." I understood her frustration, but the Army was the only place I ever truly felt like I belonged. I was good at my job. People relied on me. That kind of trust is rare. By 2019, the cracks were impossible to ignore. At first, they were small things. She'd get irritated when I called while she was out with friends. She talked often about how her friend Melissa had divorced her husband and was now living her best life. She started saying we had nothing in common anymore. I suggested counseling. "We're fine," she said. "It's just a phase." Then came the late nights at work. Weekend trips with people I'd never met. New clothes. A gym membership she barely used. I could have confronted her, but that's not how I operate. My father taught me to think before I speak. So I watched. I waited. I prepared quietly. My instincts were telling me something was coming. And in this life, you learn to trust them. 2 weeks after the divorce email, I was sitting in the mess hall when my phone vibrated. A notification from our joint bank account. Another $88,500 had been withdrawn, almost everything that was left. I set my fork down and opened the app. Balance, $22.37. Our $47,000 in savings, built over years, was gone. Transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Murphy from my unit glanced over. Bad news. No, I said. Just the bank. That night, I called the bank from the base phone center. Becky had been moving money for weeks. First small amounts, then larger ones. The biggest transfers started the day after I deployed. I ended the call and stood in the hallway for a long time. Life continued around me like nothing had happened. Guys were laughing, calling home, telling their kids goodnight. Meanwhile, my own life was quietly burning down. Wilson found me there. He'd heard from Alvarez that I looked like I'd seen a ghost at dinner. "What's going on?" he asked. I don't usually share personal things. But Wilson had pulled me out of a bad situation in Kandahar once. I trusted him. I told him my wife had emptied our accounts, moved her boyfriend into our house, and sent divorce papers while I was on patrol the week before. He didn't give me a rehearsed response. "No, I'm sorry." "No, that's rough." He just asked, "What's your plan?" "I don't know yet," I said. He nodded. "Let me know if you need anything." I didn't sleep that night. I opened my laptop and logged into our home security system, something Becky had probably forgotten about. I still had remote access. The cameras showed a strange truck in the driveway. A man I'd never seen before. He was walking my dog, using my coffee mug, wearing my Seahawks sweatshirt. And Becky was in the kitchen, laughing. The kitchen I'd remodeled with my own hands during my last leave. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger. It was colder than that. Clearer. I shut the laptop, pulled out my phone, and made a list. Call James, my buddy from the unit who's now a lawyer. Review the VA loan terms. Talk to the first sergeant about emergency leave. Go through the refinancing documents. Follow up on something Becky had casually mentioned last year. Check security measures. Lock down my military retirement accounts. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was focused, like I was planning a mission. This was no longer about emotions. It was about strategy. At 0500, before my shift started, I sent James an email. Subject, confidential. Immediate legal assistance required. His reply came an hour later. Call me only on a secure line. By the time I ended that call, I knew exactly what needed to be done. There would be no shouting, no threats, no confrontation. I didn't need to expose her. I needed to let her actions collapse under their own weight. 2 months later, I was back on U.S. soil. I didn't tell Becky. I didn't call or text. I checked into a downtown Spokane motel under a different name and contacted James. We met at a diner 10 miles outside the city. "You look rough," he said as he sat down. "So do I feel," I answered. He slid a folder across the table. We went through everything. The house deed, loan paperwork, bank statements. Then he pulled out a separate page. "This is interesting." It was a refinancing application. My name, my information, my supposed signature. But the signature wasn't mine. Close, but wrong. The middle initial was off. The pen pressure wasn't consistent. Someone had tried to copy it and failed. "Becky?" I asked, even though I already knew. James nodded. 3 months ago, she attempted to pull $330,000 in equity. Because the VA loan is in your name, your signature was required. She forged it, refinanced the house, drained the accounts, then filed for divorce. I exhaled slowly. "Efficient," I said. "There's more," James added. She listed her boyfriend as a co-applicant. Jeremy Ryan. He has a record, 2 DUIs and a fraud conviction from 2019. I leaned back. "What are my options?" James folded his hands. "That depends. What do you want?" I didn't hesitate. "I want what's legally mine, and I want her to understand the consequences." He smiled. "Then here's the plan." The next day, I drove past the house. Jeremy's truck was gone, but Becky's car sat in the driveway. I parked down the street and watched for a while. I considered knocking on the door. I didn't. Instead, I went to the bank. I met with the loan officer who had processed the refinance. I showed her my military ID, my driver's license with my real signature, and the forged documents. Her face drained of color. "I'll have to report this immediately." "I understand," I said. "I already contacted the police." That night, Becky texted me. "Who are you talking to at the bank?" Jeremy followed up. People are asking questions. I didn't respond. The next day, I went to the county recorder's office. I filed fraud objections against the refinance and placed a legal hold on the property. No changes without my direct authorization. 2 days later, Becky called. I let it go to voicemail. Nathan, we need to talk. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can handle it like adults. The same words she'd used in her email. Still, I stayed silent. That afternoon, James called. The refinance funds are frozen, he said. And there's another development. Your wife's boyfriend was driving your truck, correct? Yes. He was pulled over this morning. License suspended. I closed my eyes. They impounded the vehicle, James continued. And they found something else, prescription pads from the dental clinic where Becky works. Not blank. I sat down on the edge of the motel bed. So she's stealing prescription forms. That's what it looks like. Police are investigating. This was bigger than I expected. For a moment, I considered calling Becky, warning her out of old habit. Then I remembered the security footage, my home, my dog, my life treated like disposable property. There was no going back. And honestly, I didn't want to. The next morning, I met with the bank's fraud investigator. His name was Thompson, short, tired eyes, coffee stain on his tie. This happens more often than you think, he said, spreading the documents out. One spouse deploys. The other sees an opportunity. What happens now? I asked. We've frozen the fraudulent refinance, he said. But some of the money is already gone. How much? About half. $14,600. I leaned forward. Where did it go? He hesitated, then turned his monitor toward me. These are the outgoing transfers. I scanned the list. Multiple payments to the same name. Who is Daniel Spencer? I asked. Thompson shrugged. Not my department. But your attorney should subpoena these records. I called James the moment I left the bank. Daniel Spencer, he repeated. Let me look into it. An hour later, he called back. Found him. Real estate agent. Specializes in fast cash sales. She was planning to sell the house. That's what it looks like. Those transfers were likely deposits to list the property. And here's the interesting part. Spencer has worked with Jeremy Ryan before. My stomach tightened. How many times? 3 deals in the last 2 years. I sat down on a park bench, trying to process it. This wasn't just my wife leaving me for another man. This was organized. Ryan has a pattern, James said carefully. He targets women whose spouses are deployed or in the middle of divorce. The house gets sold below market value to one of Spencer's buyers. Ryan takes his cut and disappears. And Becky? I asked. Hard to say. She could be a victim, or she could be complicit. I rubbed my face. This isn't just personal anymore. No, James said. And you're not the only military family affected. What do we do? I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, he replied. This crosses state lines, involves VA loans, and targets service members. They're very interested. That night, I sat alone in the motel room with a beer, wondering how long Becky had been lying, or whether she'd been pulled into something she couldn't control. I wasn't even sure it mattered anymore. My phone rang. It was Becky again. Nathan, please call me. The bank says there's fraud, and Jeremy got arrested using your truck. I don't understand what's happening. I stared at the message, then typed back one sentence. Who is Daniel Spencer? The typing dots appeared. Stopped. Started again. Stopped. Finally. I don't know what you're talking about. I replied with numbers instead. 14,600, multiple transfers. Pending listing. No response. 10 minutes passed. Then, it's not what you think. I turned off my phone and lay down. The next morning, James called. The FBI wants to meet, he said. They've been tracking Ryan and Spencer for months. The mission had changed. You're not the first, Agent Patel told me. But you may be the case that brings everything into focus. For the first time since the divorce email arrived in Kandahar, I felt something close to satisfaction, not because my marriage was over, but because the truth was finally surfacing. I met with the FBI at their Spokane field office. Agents Patel and Donovan recorded my statement and collected copies of every document James and I had assembled. Patel explained that my case helped establish a pattern: intent, coordination, repetition. It turned a series of isolated incidents into a single, organized scheme. What about Becky? I asked. My wife. My ex-wife. The agents exchanged a look. We're still determining her level of involvement, Donovan said carefully. Did she ever mention financial pressure? Urgency about selling the house? I thought back. Becky had talked often about downsizing, about tying up too much money in the house. I disagreed. My income covered the mortgage comfortably. When did that start? Patel asked. About 6 months ago, I said. Around the time she met Jeremy. Around the refinance. More questions followed. More notes. When we finished, Patel handed me his card. We'll be in touch. And don't confront anyone, Ryan or your wife. We need to build this carefully. That evening, I drove back through our neighborhood and parked on the street. Jeremy's truck was back, probably released from impound. Becky's car was gone. My phone buzzed. We need to talk in person. Tomorrow. Riverfront Park. I showed the message to James over breakfast. Don't go, he said. Nothing good comes from that. I won't, I replied. But I want to see what she does while she thinks she's meeting me. At 9:30 the next morning, we parked across from the house. At 9:45, Becky walked out, got in her car, and drove toward the park. So, James asked. Now we wait. 20 minutes later, a vehicle with a real estate logo pulled up. Daniel Spencer stepped out. Jeremy followed him inside the house. Follow them? James asked. I shook my head. No need. The previous year, I'd installed interior and exterior security cameras with cloud storage. I hadn't mentioned it before because it had never mattered. I opened the app and angled the phone so James could see. Spencer was in my living room, taking photos. Jeremy was pointing out features, talking fast. I turned up the audio. We need to list by the weekend, Spencer said. There's already a buyer. Cash, like usual. How much? Jeremy asked. $420. You listed at $470, but this'll move. And the husband? Jeremy asked. Becky says he's being difficult. Spencer waved it off. They always are. Soldiers make noise, then disappear. He'll take a deal just to be done. James looked at me. You hearing this? Every word was recording. I sent a single message to Agent Patel. It's happening now. 30 minutes later, the street was filled with unmarked vehicles. I watched from a distance as agents escorted Spencer and Jeremy out in handcuffs. Patel called me. We've got them on audio discussing the fraud. Conspiracy, wire fraud, attempted sale under false pretenses. Do you need anything from me? A formal statement later. And, your wife just arrived. She's distressed. I looked down the street. Becky stood frozen on the lawn, hands over her mouth, watching agents carry boxes of evidence out of the house. What happens to her? I asked. That depends, Patel said, on what she knew and what you want. I watched her for a long time. 13 years. Not all bad. Some good. Some real. I just want what's right, I said finally. The federal case moved fast. Spencer and Jeremy turned on each other and on others. What surfaced was a 3-state operation targeting military families. Becky claimed she didn't know the full scope. She said Jeremy convinced her I was hiding money, planning to leave her with nothing. She admitted the refinance was her idea and that she'd gone along with it. Maybe it was true, maybe not. In exchange for full restitution, relinquishing any claim to the house or my military retirement, and a signed confession regarding the forgery, she accepted a settlement. I chose not to pursue additional charges. The divorce finalized 6 months after the email from Kandahar. Clean. Quiet. Finished. The day the last papers were signed, Patel called again. Jeremy Ryan was sentenced today. 8 years. Fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Spencer got 12. I thanked him. One more thing, he added. Your case helped us connect 11 others. Those families will recover their money because of you. That evening, I sat on the porch of my rental apartment watching the sun go down, thinking about all the men who left home believing things were safe and came back to nothing. I hadn't planned on dismantling an operation. I'd only wanted what was mine. Sometimes that's enough to change more than you expect. My phone buzzed. A message from Becky. I never wanted it to end this way. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. A year later, I sold the house. Too many memories. Too much betrayal in the walls. I bought a small cabin outside Missoula, Montana, 2 bedrooms, 10 acres, a creek running through the back. No neighbors for miles. I retired early. 20 years was enough. I got a German shepherd named Scout. Took on small carpentry jobs for locals. Nothing fancy, just enough to stay busy. My hands worked, the bills got paid, and my pension covered the rest. Sometimes I wondered where Becky ended up. James heard she'd moved back to Oregon, found work at another dental clinic, started over. I didn't hate her anymore. Honestly, I didn't feel much of anything. One evening, I received a letter from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband was Navy. The FBI had given her my name after breaking the case. "You don't know me," she wrote, "but you saved our home. Thank you for standing your ground when it would have been easier to walk away." I read it twice and pinned it to my fridge. On days when the silence felt too loud, I looked at that letter and reminded myself that something good had come from all of it. Last I heard, Jeremy was still in prison. Spencer too. For once, the system worked. As for me, I moved forward in silence, day by day, building something new. Not something that could be taken, forged, or betrayed, but something unrepeatable, something that belonged to me alone.